Hi, this is Jim's little boat. I really wasn't going to make a video today. We're going to raise the mast and we generally don't have time, but my buddy had to go take care of an errand and so he's on his way back. So what the heck, let's make a video. So the first thing you need to know about raising the mast on your boat is don't do this. The boat needs to be hooked up to the truck or trailer or the towing vehicle, whatever you're using, while you're raising the mast. So I got off because Tony needed to borrow the truck to go run his errand. But let's look at the pieces that are already in place. I suppose if you're young and agile, you could just climb up the boarding ladder to get in and out of the boat, or maybe stand on a fender and vault over. But I'm 75, I bring a step ladder. This device is the A-frame. It'll be spread out in the shape of a letter A on top of the deck, and it will allow us to raise the mast using the trailer winch. It's probably worth taking a look at the end of the A-frame and how it connects to the deck. It's going to connect to the chain plate, but instead of doing it the way they did it in the tech manual, I took connectors, squeezed them on one end, left them round on the other, connected them to a little piece of conduit, and that way it articulates as you're trying to raise the mast. And yes, I know my boat is really dirty. It was sparkly clean a week ago when we were supposed to launch, but we live in fir tree country, so the pollen is shedding right now. I wiped it off on the deck surfaces where I have to step because it's really slippery when it gets wet. And at this point, we already have the mast up under the mast. This is the one from Catalina Direct. Honestly, if I could afford it, I'd probably have one made out of aluminum. That puppy is heavy. I've hooked up the jib halyard to the A-frame, and I've double checked behind me to make sure it's not wrapped around anything else and it's running free. So now I've kind of taken the forestay here and just attached it with a bungee cord to the A-frame. That's just so it won't get lost. Once we crank up the mast, everything's good. And I've double checked to make sure it's running free. Let's see if we can give all this rope some context. Pardon my voice this morning, it's the tree pollen. We start out with the mast here on the mast crutch, also known as the mast up, that's the Catalina name. And we bring the jib halyard down to the A-frame, gin pole, and that is all connected to the winch strap. So as we start cranking, the mast comes up, the backstay begins to straighten out. We've got the forestay just tucked up here. And then finally we reach vertical and the mast is up, and all we've had to do is crank the trailer winch. It works quite well. Certainly it takes some time to get the A-frame set up, but this is a no fuss, no muss. You don't have to be a young, strong person to start out by holding the mast, then walking it forward. And that's why we use it. Works well, and you don't need any special equipment other than the A-frame, of course. This thing is the bridle, and its job is to be a temporary fastening point for the temporary stays that are going to hold the mast side to side. And they're just hooked up to the stanchions on the lifelines. Here's the other one. I'll come down here. I'll edit that. Okay, so they're going to make a triangle. They're going to make a triangle that allows us to have temporary stays all the time the mast is going up. There's one on each side, and you will discover when you make yours that the stanchions are not exactly spaced the same on both sides of the boat. So you'll have a port and a starboard set of bridles. Let's take a quick look at the bridles and the temporary stays. The temporary stays are just to keep the mast from wobbling to side while you raise it. There's the A-frame, and they're held in place by the bridles. The bridles have to be there because the deck is lower than the mast and you wouldn't have a fair triangle. So the bridles give you this triangle that stabilizes the mast while you raise it. So bridle, temporary stay, main halyard, you can tighten that up while it's all in the crutch, and then that will keep the mast stabilized. That's why you're able to do this from the ground by yourself. Now, I'm lucky, I have Tony to do it, but I just stand there and watch and double check lines while he raises it. So that's what this whole business is about here, of the bridles and the temporary stay. Now I'm going to take the main halyard and attach it to the temporary stays. And look it up there, one side of this is on the wrong side of the spreader, so I'll have to fix that. That's where the temporary stay is held by the main halyard, and it's kind of under and behind everything so it can provide lateral support as the mast goes up. Since I didn't have the GoPro set up, I borrowed some footage from the Webbers, the barn boat folks. You can see what an easy process it is. At that time, it was actually me at the winch. Like Tony said, the hardest part of this job is getting the cotter pins in. We used the winch to raise the mast, then Tony disconnected it from that little pulley and over tightened the halyard, I'll get the word right, and that gave him some slack for the forestay. We didn't get a lot of video because we had a few problems in the process. One of the shrouds hung up on these two little cleats that I never use for anything, so I think maybe they need to go away. And the nice thing about doing it this way is when that shroud did hang up, Tony just stopped and walked around and flipped the shroud off of the cleat, and you can see the temporary stays did their job. I'm going to go disconnect all that stuff now, and we'll start loading the boat and getting ready to launch. Well, gosh, I had hoped to make a video a bit more grand than this one, but the boat's launched. I spent 3 hours today cleaning up the little details we hadn't taken care of. So, hey, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you out on the water Wednesday. Sometimes I think I'm just too old to be down here under the house fixing plumbing. And then other times I'm totally sure I'm too old to be down here under the house fixing plumbing.